but generative AI is something that can really help with a lot of that sort of reskilling and helping people just kind of gain some new perspective and new skills to help them in their current jobs as well.
If I look at the first invoice automation project we ever did, it was like a year's worth of effort. It was like 2017. 2022, we could do that in like 3 months.
They're doing development, they're doing analysis, they're doing just everyday work that they may do for their own or personal hobby stuff.
If you wanted my honest answer, I think people have just changed the name to sound cooler.
Hello, and welcome to Greenlight Consulting's first podcast. This podcast is to talk about technology business drivers relating to robotic and intelligent process automation, business process management, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Goldenberg. And to give you a quick glimpse into my background, I've spent over the 15 years in the information technology and business process improvement space, with the last 5.5 years being focused on robotic process automation and related services and technologies. This podcast, of course, is not about me. So let's take a look at what we're going to be talking about today. It's a phrase everyone's been talking about. It becomes more and more popular as the year goes on. It's really kind of started off at the start of this year with the public release or public preview release of ChatGPT. So we're going to be talking a little bit about generative AI. We want to know, is this just a buzzword? What sort of technologies and services are out there, and what can be utilized today? We're going to discuss how it's relevant to the process automation space, what impacts we see it having on different organizations in the near future, and what organizations should be keeping an eye on as we kind of move forward throughout this. I'm not going to be talking by myself, of course, though. This is a very large topic, and I'm not a complete expert in it. So we're going to be bringing in a couple other Greenlight team members who are experts in their related fields. I'm joined today by Shameiz, CEO of Greenlight Consulting, and Yash, Brahmbhatt, one of our senior developers and technology enthusiasts who has been researching the capabilities relating to generative AI.
Thanks, Louis. I'm Shameiz, CEO of Greenlight Consulting. Been in the IT space 25 years. Oh, I didn't want to say that out loud. We started off in testing automation delivery, and then worked my way into the cooler stuff that was RPA and IPA over the last few years. Happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I mentioned we're also joined by Yash, one of our senior developers. Yash, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your interest is in generative AI.
Sure. Thanks, Louis. I've been professionally coding for almost 5 years now, mainly in the RPA space, familiar with most of the tools. And getting into generative AI was more just hey, this looks really cool. I want to see what it can do.
All right, perfect. No, it's short and sweet. That's always good. So before we hop into the discussion, Shameiz, can you just give us maybe a brief 1-minute overview of an introduction of kind of like who Greenlight is and what we do?
Yeah, just celebrated our 15-year anniversary this year, so that's a big deal. Company started in the project delivery and QA automation space, and then we spent about, I want to say 5-6 years doing that. And then, around 2009, 10, 11, it got really commoditized, and we like doing newer, cool stuff, don't like being a cost center. So I have the pleasure of having 2 partners that were willing to sort of invest some money and time to figure out what we should do next. And we spent 6 months looking around and discovered RPA was just ascendant, was really in the same space we were in, testing automation, operational automation, very close together. And decided to just move the entire company over to the RPA world. So we spent a little bit of time doing that. I think by 2015, 2016, we were a Blue Prism partner. By 2017, 2018, we were a UiPath partner. And then in 2019, we were an Automation Anywhere partner. And we've brought on other capabilities like Appian, OutSystems, Mimica, and a few other things we could talk about later. Company is based out of the US, Canada, and everyone's favorite country, Costa Rica. And we help customers deliver digital transformation and intelligent automation solutions. Everything from enterprise to federal government to municipals and education.
Perfect. That's a great intro. Thank you very much for that. I will take a moment to mention there, a lot of the reskilling that you just talked about is something that tons of organizations are going through. And being able to hear that, we went through that same sort of process where we reskilled everyone over to a completely new technology and type of
Don't we
delivery.
do that every year? I feel like isn't reskilling ourselves to a new technology the thing we do now?
Sometimes. It feels like a lot of times we're just adding on some advanced things. Like switching from one to the other is very, very large, and it's now something that I think we're going to get into it in the discussion a little bit. But generative AI is something that can really help with a lot of that sort of reskilling and helping people just kind of gain some new perspective and new skills to help them in their current jobs as well. So let's set the stage for this conversation for the viewers, the audience, whoever's going to be listening to this. I mentioned that we're going to be discussing generative AI, but this isn't going to be like a very in-depth technical conversation about how it all really works. We want to talk a little bit more about kind of where it fits within the current business strategies that we see organizations having. Some of the features and services within the RPA and IPA space that we've seen that are of interest, and sort of the impact and value that we see generative AI having on organizations, both in the near and the far term. Shameiz, why don't we maybe ease into this with a very simple question? I think most people probably already know this, especially if they're listening to this podcast. But this isn't really about generative AI to start. Can you explain to me the difference between robotic process automation and intelligence process automation?
Oh man, I'm gonna fail at this, but let's try it. If you wanted my honest answer, I think people have just changed the name to sound cooler over the last 3-4 years. I think RPA was, even when we started this with Blue Prism, was fairly intelligent. It's in terms of, hey, we had to understand computer vision. We sometimes had to find different ways to interact with systems that weren't deterministic. So I think the idea of intelligence in RPA was just to sort of layer on the fact, or at least communicate better, the fact that we have tools that are non-deterministic, that can read documents and do intelligent document processing, that can read screens and understand what's going on from a machine learning model. And so adding that intelligence piece was, I think, what IPA was supposed to signify. I think, even when, like if I look at 2018, 2017, when we really started getting into it, and the company was really focused, there was this big sort of debate on what should we call it? What's the right marketing term? Robots scare people. Let's not use the word robots, right? Let's, and there's intelligence. People want to be on the AI bandwagon even then. So I do think it's subtle, it's meaningful, but I do think a lot of it is marketing. And as we move into the AI space, I think you'll see the same trends, right? It's, the tools we use today have some really cool specialized AI already built in. And we didn't call it specialized AI till about February of this year. Right? And then we sort of renamed it just so that everyone could understand what we're talking about. But I do think that's how the technology space works. So I'm not sure if I'm right, Lewis. Am I right?
Honestly, it's a bit all over the place, but I agree. It's a bit more of a marketing term. It does really kind of talk to adding in some of those intelligence capabilities into things like RPA. And it doesn't even have to actually be RPA. It's just adding intelligent automation on top of any sort of existing technology that's there today, whether that be, again, a third-party vendor service you're using or just a standalone service by itself. It's having the intelligent capabilities within the tool that's able to help drive some sort of business value.
Yeah.
So that was an easy softball question for you.
Great.
Where does generative AI fit into all that?
Well, one, I would encourage anyone that's listening to this podcast to pull out a piece of paper and count the number of times we say generative AI.
I was going to mention that later on see, like, hey, if you go back and count.
Like, what's your over-under on this term? I've been on the conference circuit for the last few months, and I would have lost every time I picked a number for the amount of times everyone said it. So anyway, yeah, I think we're still figuring that out. And I think as we talk about it further, we'll see where it works and where it doesn't. But I think the classic thought process, and it hasn't changed between generative AI and specialized AI, is the idea that, IPA, RPA is the muscle. It's how you get the work done. It's how you interact with systems. it's how you go the last mile and put the data where it needs to be in. But the decision making was quite deterministic in the old days, right? So we would do if thens, we would try to figure out cases. But in this case, you could plug in an AI engine for the brain, and now all of a sudden, you don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to know all the inputs. You can kind of train a model to do something and give you an output and go. So I do think that's how generative AI fits. I'll preface it with the fact that today I don't think I've seen a generative AI use case where there isn't human in the loop required, right? So the idea that if I'm letting a machine come up with an output, and it's not deterministic, and it's going to do that with a model where it's actually doing probabilities, whether it's on words or pictures or whatever. Somebody's got to look at that before it goes out today. Well, maybe we'll probably get to a place where we'll get one model to look at another model, right? But I think today, none of that output feels final and like a dot. We run unattended robots all the time in the IPA world. I don't think we're going to run unattended outputs from generative AI in the short term. I don't know if that makes sense. Yash, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think the core concept is that it is not deterministic, right? And so if you have any sort of business decisions that you need to be deterministic on, you probably can't plug and play generative AI.
No, that's pretty good. Yeah. All right, so maybe Yash, why don't we continue on with you here a little bit? So you and I have chatted a couple times when we've been talking about some generative AI and looking at some areas that we might be able to use it internally ourselves. What are your thoughts on how like every software vendor's marketing team suddenly claims that they have generative AI built into the platform? Is it just a buzzword everyone's kind of grabbing onto? Have you seen any usable technology and services so far being delivered with generative AI?
I mean, I don't think I've really seen anything. Actually, that's not true. The strongest use case that I've personally used is I think it's GitHub Copilot, or the assistant that helps you write code, and that's been like a huge time saver. Obviously not on a large scale, like it's not writing entire like classes and functions for me, but
isn't this your dream, Yash?
Oh yeah.
Didn't you start at this company going, can I just hire 5 people in India to do my job and I'll just pretend to be that? And are we there yet?
Definitely not there, but getting closer. Like I think it really is pretty good. I mean, yeah, there's cool stuff you can do, like maybe put it into a feedback loop with something that can test it and see just how well it can perform.
So instead of me going, hey, you're going to do less work now, what I can really assume is you're going to do way more in the same amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that freak you out? Like, are you worried that this will like do the stuff
like
you're
from
good
like
at?
what angle? Like am I going to lose my job angle? Like,
yeah.
I don't see it that way. Like, I mean, we get asked that question quite a bit, I think, in the RPA space. But like the way I look at it is, it doesn't seem like there's any, like this time doesn't feel any different. Like, like when, trains or cars came out, like, there were some jobs lost, elevators, and like the story of like the person in the elevator pressing the button or whatever.
Yeah.
Or operating it, like that, those sort of, like it doesn't feel like it's that much of a difference that it's gonna like wipe out it. Like we've been through this before, so I guess, yeah, that's a very like high level view of it, but I guess personally people might have different opinions.
I saw a clip of a university prof from 1994 talking about, somebody asked them the question, oh man, I wish I could, I'll look for it and put it on a link if I can find it, but they asked the question, hey, now with the internet, are you worried that your students are going to go cheat and find those answers? And I think this prof was ahead of their time, because by the time I graduated, they still weren't doing this right. But the prof said, hey, I'm just going to assume they do that. And I'm going to make sure the questions they ask are conducive to a higher level of conversation and not just the things I used to go through the road. And I think we've always said that in the industry, right? We've been in the RPA, IPA world for like 7 years, 6 years. Every business we've been to, we've had this conversation. And the truth is, they could do more with less. It wasn't the hype. It turned out to be you could do more with less. I don't know what it looks like in a decade, but in the next 2 to 3 years, I agree. It feels the same with AI. I don't know, Louis, you're close to this too. What do you think?
No, I definitely think it's going to become a lot more prevalent as we move forward here. Like it's going to definitely be. I mean, already is. Even if you look in an academic area, for example, like everyone goes to ChatGPT and tries to get it to give them all the answers that they want. People are going to become more familiar with it as they go on. They'll understand prompt engineering a little bit better. They're going to get the answers that they want.
Yeah, is that a career now?
Sorry, what was
Is prompt engineering?
prompt engineering?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and for anyone that doesn't know, so prompt engineering is just more of how you ask the questions to the AI. The format that you put it in, the way you word it is going to give you different responses. So you could ask the exact same question like 5 different ways, and you're going to get 5 different responses to it. Right. So as people really start to like look at Google, for example, right? When people do searches, there's some people that are very specific of what they want to put in. Others very broad. And even though they're trying to get to the same answer, they're getting different results because of how they put that in. AI is going to be no different for that, whether it be from a generative AI that you're just trying to have it create something for you, or even just as something that's part of an existing process that you may have, maybe a business process or somewheres. It's going to give you an outcome based on what you put into it. So it's something that people are going to learn over time.
We need to get a prompt engineering certification. Like I need, when Yash goes on a project, it'd be like prompt engineer, architect. Prompt.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of interesting stuff you can do. Like, I mean, I've only really explored like OpenAI's GPT platform.
Yeah.
And like you can engineer the prompt in multiple ways. You can say, hey, you can give it like a list of functions that it can then respond with, like, hey, I want to call this function. So you can quote unquote enable GPT to like make a query to a database or do like other cool stuff like that. And yeah, like I think there's some interesting architectural patterns that really enable more use cases with GPT. So I definitely think prompt engineering is going to be big in the future.
All right. Well, so now that we have kind of an idea of where generative AI fits into the landscape of RPA and IPA, let's maybe shift the focus a little bit towards that business side that we're talking about. So, I mean, I can say, for example, and probably you guys can as well, it feels like every single conversation we have with, whether it be a client, a software vendor, whoever, they mention generative AI in some way, shape, or form. We won't even get into how every technology seemingly has generative AI all of a sudden in it, even though it, just kind of really started becoming commercialized. But maybe can you, Shameiz, give us a brief synopsis of what you think generative AI actually means for organizations, for their employees, their customers, just sort of like what that impact really is going to be and what we really kind of see them expect them to do with it.
Yeah, let me get practical and then we'll step back a bit. I think if I look at a pattern that I see today that's actually doable, right? It's sort of, hey, I have a bunch of text input, whether it was voice input that I turned to text or it's coming in an email or it's chat. And I take that and I run that through a specialized AI engine that classifies it. This is a customer asking for a mortgage. This is a new customer looking for a bank account, whatever. I go ahead and I classify what's coming. And then, so that's a specialized classification engine. Then I go use IPA to go get more context, right? Because what, generative AI needs is more context to be correct. So you sit there and you say, okay, well, I see a customer name here. Thanks, specialized AI model. Let's go look in my system. Oh, yes, this customer exists. Yes, the email matches. Oh, they already have a mortgage. It's coming due. Here are the new rates. They're a preferred customer. So our internal preferred rates are this. Okay. You take all that context that you've gathered with IPA and you give it to the generative AI model. You say, respond back. Like send the note back. And do it in our voice. This is a preferred customer. Make sure you're being proper and polite and saying all the right things, and generate what I'm saying back to them. And then that goes to a person, and that person says, yes, this looks good. The model's not hallucinating or saying something weird. Send it off. And And that, to me, like, customer experience is where we're going to see this first, because that's where we have the most data. And I know we'll get into the value of data, but if I go to most organizations and if you told me to close my eyes and guess where they had good data, it'd be at their contact centers where they go and deal with their customers, right? We've got standard operating procedures. We've got ticketing systems with ServiceNow. We kind of know what's coming in. We know what we've sent out, and we know how to do that process, right? So that feels like the model we start with. So I think the implication is that you should see better customer service. You should be able to like find whatever platform or channel you want to talk to your bank, your retailer, and get an answer back that's relevant, which has been the problem today with this stuff, and targeted and accurate back to you way faster. So that's the impact today. I do think we're going to get to, maybe I can get a call on with the customer service rep and actually not hate it now, right? Maybe it's not just a cross-sell opportunity. They can spend time getting to know me as a customer, and all the rote stuff that drives us to keep us on hold for 35 minutes is over. So I do think that's where it starts. I don't know where it goes. I'm open to it. Yash, where does it go?
Yeah, no, I think that's like a very solid like scenario to use it or use case. I think like other things might be like a personal assistant type of thing if you want to go sort of more on the consumer side.
Yeah.
But I think there's also like things like IT help desk and like basically like creating like a level 1 support for like each of your individual teams within an organization, which would be super helpful as well. Like if I want to, I don't know, if I have a question about, can I get access here? Then that doesn't necessarily need to go to a human.
Does citizen development become your autopilot or co-pilot? That's your citizen developer now, and then all of a sudden that becomes real. Like if we've been struggling with anything, it's getting smart people to help themselves with technology. Does this make it easier?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can use it as like an interface between human words and like the technology. And
yeah,
so
we're finally able to sort of, or we're not yet, but able to drive coding by how we speak. Yes. Where before we'd have to learn a syntax and a language of how the computer spoke. And we've been getting better, right? Mm-hmm. We're not writing machine code anymore. We got to like the higher level language. Then we got to low code. I wonder if we can get to conversational development. Life gets.
I think it's starting to get towards that whole idea of Iron Man Jarvis, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone's going to be walking around. They're just going to have, a watch or some device on them, like a phone, and they're just going to be able to speak to it, and it's going to run and do all these things. I mean, we're starting to, we see a lot of that now with things like Siri and Google Assistant and things like that. But
it's frustrating today. Like,
I
yell at Siri.
Yeah.
And for what's worth, those aren't necessarily, they're not built on Gen AI. I'm sure those are getting loaded into it, but it's not something that they're built on top of. And as part of that, they're limited in their scope and what they can do. And now, if you start to get stuff like this and you start to like, I have an assistant on my computer and it's also on my phone and it's also connected to my watch and everywhere else. And I ask, and now if it can connect to everything, it really starts to do like exactly what you're saying. It starts to take a lot of those blockers that people may have today with, whether it be that they're doing development, they're doing analysis, they're doing just everyday work that they may do for their own or personal hobby stuff, right? It really kind of helps with removing some of those barriers and letting anybody get involved inside of that.
I just have a quick analogy just on sort of the changes, right? If I look at the first invoice automation project we ever did, I remember, there was like 2,000 vendors this company had, and we were like, we'll do your top 20 and have that in 10 months. And we'll get the other 20 in 2 more months. It was like a year's worth of effort. It was like 2017. 2022, we could do that in like 3 months, right? We're down to probably about 8 weeks, 9 weeks, depending on how complicated it is. We could do way more now, faster, for cheaper. And I'm sitting there going, what are we going to be able to do for our customers in 2 years? That would have been cost prohibitive, and now it's trivial. And I think that keeps me up at night and makes me excited. But those are the things I think we're walking into really soon.
So that leads us into the next sort of question. So Shameiz, you were recently at the Automation Anywhere's Imagine 2023 conference, and then you and I were both at the UiPath Forward 6 conference.
Yep.
What were your biggest takeaways from both of those in regards to generative AI? Like, do you see some of the services and advanced technologies that they're going to be coming out with in the near term, something that's really going to help accelerate some of this? Is it something that it's like, it talks nice, but maybe it's something that's not quite there yet?
Okay. I'm going to turn it back to you in a bit, but let me talk about sort of the things I got out of it. One, things happen when you spend R&D on it, right? When you really focus on something, magic happens. Now, sometimes you hit walls, but you know these RPA, IPA platforms have been pretty good at throwing money at the right place. So they're spending money, and they're spending money on integrating it into their platforms. And I think in the beginning, the hype's pretty big, and some of the actuality is pedantic, but it's meaningful. Like, I think there was an engine to auto-train invoices, or at least give you a first pass. It was going to generate what it thought all these, items were on an invoice. That was different than the specialized model. The specialized model runs, and there's still some pre-training to do. So if I could accelerate training of a specialized model with generative AI, well, that invoice automation project just went down, right? It just shrunk a bit more. So I think there's some reality there. I think the co-pilots and the autopilots from a dev perspective are going to become extremely powerful. From a user perspective, I'm not smart enough to answer that question yet. I can see how maybe it can help. And I also think there's a real fight for who orchestrates the AI, right? And where does that live? Do we need a bot ops do we need an AI ops platform that runs it? Can I make these RPA, IPA platforms the center of how I create models, deploy them, run them, validate them, look for bias, right? Today, those are separate applications, but your control center, your orchestrator, your control room, they're all the right places, at least for organizations that have like advanced automation platforms, right? I think we'll get lost in the conversation of where's the best place to put this thing. And I tend to be not the person anymore that says what's the best tool for the job, where it's 2023. There's like 85 of the best tools for the job. What are you good at? What's faster? What's going to be around in the next 5 years? And what do you support? Like, I'm bad when people ask me what the best tool for the job is. So what I'm seeing is the fight for control over where AI lives in an organization and how you deploy it. And I have a bias, right? I come from the IPA world, and when I look at these platforms, like, oh, it makes a ton of sense. When I get to my large enterprise customers, they have model ops, they have model creation, and then they have IPA. And so I don't know where it goes, but those are the macro trends I see. But Louis, you were there. You tell me what's cool on the generative AI reality set.
Personally, I'm kind of really excited to see some of that end user conversational AI services, which include generative AI. So, I mean, it's been out for a few months now, but like Microsoft's Copilot, right? UiPath has now their autopilot that's going to be coming out. We're actually about to be testing.
And AA's got their
Automation Anywhere has their Copilot as well.
Yeah.
So we have Copilot, Autopilot, Copilot. We're going to see more of these coming out for different services, but seeing some of those in action, it kind of really drives home that whole a robot for everyone that all the vendors have been talking about over the past few years. More than that, any organization, I think, that's not already stood up or is putting resources towards a citizen development program in, whether it be starting now or at least in the next 6 months or so, they're going to find themselves playing catch up, because when these start to really roll out, it's going to enhance a lot of those programs very, very quickly. Like we have some clients that we work with that they have citizen development programs already up and running. They have a few people and they're building automations today. But if you now give them the power of something where they can just simply ask it or tell it like, hey, I need to do this thing, right? I need to navigate to this website, download this table or this file, and then do something with it. And if it can build out that entire framework for them, and then all they have to do is just configure, say, yep, this is where the file is, these are the fields I need to pull out, and it then does that automatically, that's going to reduce their system development time from, let's say it's taken them a few days today, or maybe a couple of weeks, depending, what that might look like or how much time they have to put towards it,
Yeah.
to a few hours, right? Now, you can also then flip around and, sure, like Yash, you're probably looking at some of this within our own space of doing RPA delivery, but like whether it be ourselves or clients that have that COE and they have those developers in place, they're also going to be able to use things like that to accelerate that delivery, which again, Shameiz, as you mentioned, it's going to reduce that time to deliver fairly significantly, right? And that's just on the coding side. Like that's not even talking about things like, hey, here's my process flow from this document I created. Can you just generate me a Visio diagram of this, please? Right? Like when you start to get some of that, the analysis side becomes even easier.
The discovery side is where I think a lot of the magic happens today. Like even if we talk about what Mimic is today and what it can be, the idea that I don't even have to know my process, and you organizations, you know who you are. Many of us and you, there's stuff we don't know anymore. These organizations grew fast. We don't have a view of what's happening under a business unit, and so the ability to get a tool that goes and watches, learns, and then generates a process flow and all the exceptions. That's the magic. That's the hard part today. That's where developing is developing. No offense, Chad. I know there's some magic in that, and the good developers build like hardened great code. But you got nothing if we've told you the wrong things to build. And I think that's exciting to me, and it feels like it's here-ish. Here.
So Yash, maybe to that point. So, in this space that we've been looking at, we've talked about a few different services like ChatGPT, Copilot, Autopilot. What other services you mentioned before GitHub, but are there any other services that you've found like throughout your research on the topic that you think automation leaders should be looking at or keeping an eye on as things move forward?
Nothing specifically stands out. I mean, they're all kind of the same. Like in terms of really helping with development is just how can I translate human to machine like as fast as possible. And so like GitHub Copilot is a more generic one. UiPath has a very particular syntax, so they have to specialize or create a specialized one of their own. I assume it's similar with other platforms, but it's all kind of the same under the hood.
If there's a problem with like picking a platform today, especially for our customers, right? It's that they can pick wrong. Does migrating from one platform to another get easier now that we can maybe use generative AI to say, give me this particular platform I'm on and turn this into this platform? And then maybe I'm not so saddled by migrations and stuck with technology. And I don't know, will we get there? Are we there?
I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I haven't really played around with it too much, but I would expect that it would probably take a couple more iterations before it really gets great.
Yeah, I think the vendors are going to be obviously looking at that for themselves because, of course, any clients that they can migrate over. But it is something that's going to probably be a little bit down the road because, especially for ones where they have proprietary language, right? You need to wait. They need to figure out how to change that over, especially if they don't have that documentation like really laid out, in terms of behind the scenes what that code looks like. So that really has to be understood. So there was something that you guys both had mentioned earlier around kind of like that. Oh, are the robots going to take my job and things like that? So 7 to 8 years ago, when RPA really kind of blew onto the scene, like it's been around for about 20 years now, but really became popular around 2016 or so. Yeah. And since then, we've had a lot of conversations where people are scared that they're going to lose their jobs to these robots. We've seen it time and time again. Organizations are typically they're not letting people go because of the work that RPA is doing. Instead, what we're seeing is they're focusing them onto higher level work and projects reskilling them, or even when there is just enough automated process in place, they manage it through attrition, right? When someone leaves, now they just don't have to replace that person because these robots have taken on enough of the work that everyone that's remaining is able to handle what's there without necessarily overloading them. So with that sort of thought in mind, do you see that same sort of conversation cycle starting up again, Shameiz, with generative AI? Is it different this time because people have already had that sort of conversation with RPA? What are you telling like business leaders to help them with that topic?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'm telling my kids first. Okay, so and I'm going to broad brushstrokes, so let's not hold me to everything. But if you sort of look at the early technology booms like 60s, 70s, 80s, you could learn a skill, you can get a job, and that was your job till you retire. Then we got to the 80s and 90s, and you'd get a job, and you'd see this disruption coming. And for some of us, the disruption happened, and we had to reskill, right? But then we reskilled twice, maybe 3 times, right? If you're a child of the 70s, if you're a child of the 90s or 2000s, I think your world has changed. And that is not standard human behavior. We haven't evolved to not have any anchors in place or any foundations. And if they're constantly getting changed, you kind of have to get into a framework of thinking that your job is going to change. You know, as a business owner, there's no way we're going to be doing the same things in 4 years that we're doing today. There's no way, right? We're either going to be doing them faster, we're going to be doing more, we're going to be doing larger thought processes. Let's fix your mortgage journey, not let's fix risk adjudication. Like, those are the things we're going to get to. And so I do think that's scary. And if you're not a child of the 90s or 2000s and you're a child of the 80s or 70s or 60s, that wasn't the framework you were born with. So I think there's lots to do here to get people to be okay with this. I do think what I tell, customers as they ask is, I appreciate sort of the gigantic seismic shift that happened when ChatGPT came out, because what you thought was science fiction became science fact. And then you scratched it a little bit and you're like, still a little science fiction. So you have a bit of time. But I do think this idea of meritocracy and constant learning is the new normal. And I don't think anyone's job is going to look the same. You may have the same title, but I don't think your job looks the same. I don't think an AP clerk circa 1999 was an AP clerk in 2010 and was an AP clerk in 2019, 2020. So it's a broad answer to, I think, a specific question, but I think that's where I would land on where we got to be. I don't know the answer 5 years from now, and nobody does. 0 people know this answer. Somebody's got a guess that might be right. And so all you can do is kind of like prep for the change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. And then maybe that helps out here. So Yash, from that same sort of viewpoint in kind of the development space, do you see kind of the biggest value for generative AI being for more established developers, or those who are just maybe getting into the scene, those looking to become developers? Is using things like generative AI, like, would that be considered cheating because, you're just asking it to create this code for you? You're not really necessarily learning how to do that yourself.
Is it a different muscle?
Disingenuous maybe to your skills. So what does that look like in your view?
Yeah, I think like you can approach it from both sides, right? Like I think it's going to be like you're going to have it be able to address both audiences. Like you're going to have it you're going to have advanced developers who are going to be like, I want to do a depth first tree search, and I need it to be done in this complexity of time or this complexity of space, and that sort of stuff. And then like ask it to write test cases and automate them and all that stuff. And then you'll also have it from the kind of what we were talking about with citizen development, where like if you kind of don't need to understand all the technical stuff, like why, like just tell it to do something and it does it. Like that's super cool too. And I think like even if this is speaking from personal experience, but like sometimes you just pick up on patterns. So like I don't know, when I was like learning programming, a lot of it was just copy pasting from Stack Overflow, right? And then it would work, and I'd be like, okay, great. And then I just did that again and again, and eventually you just pick up on certain patterns. Like, okay, this is how this function works.
You got an emergent property out of your development from putting
exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it'll address both the use cases. I think like it's great for citizen development. It's great for advanced developers. Yeah.
How does your job change though? Like, just help me understand this, because I think my expectation is that you're no longer just a developer at that point. You're a problem solver on a much more macro scale, and the problem is the business problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have to get closer to that? Is that a different muscle? Like, how do we get? I don't know the answer. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like I guess primarily how I view my job is I just convert business requirements to code.
Sure.
That's it. So I'm essentially just a translator. So now if
you're so modest.
If generative AI comes in and is able to translate for me, that's like, okay, great. Then I can go do something else. Like
what's that other thing? And I still want to keep you on payroll. So what's that other thing?
Yeah, I guess like, so, I mean, it's not like an organization's going to have no more technical challenges. There's still going to be like infrastructure stuff. There's still going to be like architectural stuff. It's not really going to solve for that, but
can you experiment more now with the customer? Can you try to solve a problem? Are we looking at different engines? Are we trying different solutions? Like, what's the constraint we're solving for now?
Well, you just make the machine that helps make machines better. Like you just you make it so you help make that thing that people can talk to that writes code for it.
What are we going to do with all our free time? It's amazing.
It's that question. Like, we need to figure this out for ourselves, which also means clients are going to have to be trying to figure this out for themselves. So,
and we have the luxury of, the thing about consulting that's kind of cool is you get a broad view of the same problem across multiple places. And I think we get the luxury to experiment and try something different and understand the nuances. And I think getting there is going to be helpful. I know where I'm spending my R&D dollars this year, I guess.
So with some of this too, like maybe staying in the vein of this conversation, I think we've seen a recurring theme with RPA where everyone has this idea that you need to implement it across the entire process, right? Of course, we know in reality you don't. You can just implement and add automation capabilities at different parts. You bring humans back into that process at certain points for things like an approval step, a review, whatever makes sense. Could just be an exception piece. So maybe to question kind of both of you is, how do you see generative AI fitting into that business process from that perspective? You know, whether they're for internal processes, customer facing, could be supply chain, finance, whatever. Is generative AI kind of that integration point for users? Does it sit in the back end doing its work? And you just, hey, here's some information, give me an output, please. Like, what does that look like?
Yash, what do you think?
I don't know really. I think I guess the way I see it, it might be helpful as an orchestration thing. Like having like that front end of a chat that hooks up in the back end to all the different pieces of your organization. Like that to me is valuable. It's kind of like what a service desk or the ticketing system would do, but much more human friendly because it's a chat instead of forms that we're filling out all the time.
Yeah, that made me think of something. I think, we've been in the world of ERP for decades now, right? And the world of ERP is, you're not special. This is how the process works, and follow it, and your life is easier. And you just kind of turn to all these unique, weird organizations that run the same. I mean, they don't. We've been there, right? But ish the same. Do we move to a model now where we kind of go back and be like, you be you? And when someone's like, hey, I got to pay this invoice, they just send that into the engine, and it says, okay, this is the invoice. This is my back office system. Let's pay it. Hey, user, just give me some insights. And I wonder if we can get back to like having evolutionary differences between organizations instead of sort of there's one best way to do supply chain. And then guess what happens? You hit a pandemic and your one best way that your entire world follows get slammed.
Yep.
And we didn't have the variability in our businesses that would allow for that kind of shock. So that's one. I think the other way, Lewis, that I think we go back to discovery. If I've learned anything, businesses are solving big problems. And we've solved small problems with IPA for a bit. We're just getting into the world over the last 2 years of solving big problems. Make my mortgage journey better. Help me get less risky when I give out a credit card. That's the problems that those big organizations are trying to solve. Get this cobalt to the factory the fastest. They don't care if that part of the problem. They care. Somebody cares. But the execs don't care and the business doesn't care. So I think if we can put discovery tools and understand the big picture, and then optimize that big picture, and then deploy these amazing tool sets we have to actually activate and action the big picture. Whether we do process orchestration with Appian and, robotics with AA or UiPath and, use ChatGPT in there. It doesn't matter, but I think we have to start solving bigger problems to stay relevant and do more for our customers. So I would say discovery is where I think we use it the most.
So let's talk a little bit about senior leadership at organizations and what they might be interested in. So Shameiz, for CIOs, CFOs, COOs, how do you see generative AI disrupting or transforming the work that they or their teams do every day?
Well, I think we live in a world of uncertainty, which is terrible for executives, right? And what this did was just throw a bomb of uncertainty in there and kind of made their board members ask them, say, what's your AI strategy? And they're asking their team, what's my AI strategy? And as you filter down to the organization, the people actually doing the work are like, what's real? Here's one framework. And that's not where everyone's head at. So I think from an executive perspective, there's how do I look at my feet? What can I do today? And I think we've talked about some use cases and there's some other cool ones, but I don't think we know. And I don't think they know. And I think they know they don't know, but they need an answer and we need an answer. So I think my answer for us is we are unable to rest on any laurels anymore. We used to have the luxury of becoming the best IPA company, right? We learned, we got better, we're amazing today. And it's not like I can go, look at us, we made it, right? I think it's going to change in the next 30 days. And I think that's challenging for large enterprises that have internal immune systems and momentum. And we've got to figure out how to help them go fast. And they're actually, what's interesting is, I don't know if we're a boutique anymore or not, but, when we first started in this space, executives wouldn't look at us because they're like, hey, you don't understand this. But we were fast. We were good. We were agile. We learned quickly. Today, they look at us and go, we want to do that. How do we do that? And I think, when we're in these large enterprises, yes, we're building automations and robots, but we're teaching them how to go faster. And we're not, it's not like, hey, let's do an agile program. And it's not baked in theocracy, right? It's really about how do we go fast. So I think the things executives are trying to figure out, I know the thing I'm trying to figure out is how do we stay fast, not be freaked out all the time by the change, help the people that are a bit slower to learn. I have a superstar developer that's using a new platform going, this sucks, can't use it, right? And it's not generative AI, but that person has a framework of thinking and it's an amazing thing. Doesn't translate to this technology. And so as the world sort of moves around, I think we've got to figure out how everyone fits and what we do to grow. But it's very macro problems right now. I haven't figured out the answer. I don't know. Yash, Lewis, what do you got? Help me solve this problem.
Help you. That's kind of what we're working on. We're trying to figure that out ourselves so we can help you. We don't really have that answer yet.
Help you.
No, it's definitely something we're looking at. Okay, so it's good to hear, and it's something that we're going to be working towards ourselves to figure out how we can help those organizations. How do you see this technology impacting businesses like ourselves, where we provide the software delivery services? Is this something that's going to impact the work we do in discovery and analysis, development, testing? Will it help us deliver faster? personally, I think it will, but I don't know the other impacts it's going to have. Do we also see like clients? Are they going to take on more of this work themselves and require less from us? Is this going to cannibalize the RPA work that we do? What does that look like? What do you think that looks like?
Can I just answer with yes? Yes.
It's always a response. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll talk to Yash's point. This is nothing new. It's faster though, and it's just going to get faster. So I think we've got to reflex our agility muscle, our learn fast muscle, our experiment and adjust muscle. I think consulting being dead has been a panacea for a couple of decades, and I've been through multiple rounds of that. So I don't believe that's true. I think we get the luxury of trying and being good at something really quickly and then help our customers get good at it. And I want them to get good at it so I can do new stuff. Like, I don't know about you, but Yash gets super bored really easy. And he doesn't like doing what he did a year ago. And my whole team's like that, right? So I think the idea that we can actually be fresher and do newer things is going to be that's good for us. To me, it's a retention policy. I know that feels like I'm blowing smoke, but I actually do feel like it's a retention policy that smart, capable people get to do cool new things all the time and help customers learn how to do them. I think we got a future in that.
We've talked a lot about generative AI today, what the impacts might be, where we see it being utilized. Shameiz, what do you think the three biggest drivers that leadership teams and organizations should be thinking about when looking at this type of technology?
3. Okay, I got 2, and I'll make one up shortly. I think 1 is data, right? Like, if I've talked to anyone that cares about this space, they're freaking out about the quality of their data, which data to use. So I think that's where the focus is going to be. I don't think we're going to get anywhere at an enterprise level unless our data is good. And we've gotten away with it for a bit. Even in the RPA world, IPA world, right? We deal with bad data all the time. It makes everything harder. Companies that have their data sorted out, it makes everything easier. So 1 is get your data house in order. Find places where you trust your data. It's accurate. You trust it. And you can use it. And then we can worry about sort of AI, and it'll help everywhere. I think that, and I know CDOs have been trying to like talk about this forever, and the CIOs are like, I'm putting in this and I got to do an ERP. And I think we're at the point where the CDOs are going to be the most important person in the AI mix. So I think that's 1. 2, if you're looking for smoke on where to put or where your data is good and you can use generative AI, look for where you've automated well and a lot of. So look for the business units and the spots where you've done a lot of automation. Chances are you've either fixed your data or at least you know about it. And that's probably a place where you sort of lean into to look at it. I do think privacy, security, customer interaction, accuracy are all things we're all struggling with to some degree, and we have answers. And so, again, figure out what your human in the loop strategy is for generative AI. And I think the patterns you can do today, they're in place, right? Like, we know what they look like. I think more will come down the pipe, but that's 1. And then the last one I think I'll bring in is this is a great time for R&D. And I don't mean that like let's throw money away, but if you think about the people, like if I look at my customers today that are like 5 years into their 6 years into their IPA journey and are rocking it, they experimented in the beginning. They're like, can I use this here? Can I use this there? Where can't I? Can I use IDP tools here? And they're way ahead of the curve. And I think we're at that stage with generative AI and AI in general to say, look, experimentation is the name of the game. Agility is the name of the game. Experimentation and agility are probably going to get you to leapfrog your competition. Or you wait for someone to do it right and you copy them, right? That's the standard 2 ways to do it. Okay. That's where we're going.
I think that makes sense. And based on some of the conversations that we had, when we were at the conferences the last few weeks, they kept coming up around that type of stuff, right? It's things that we saw some clients doing months ago or even years ago. A lot are just starting to ask those questions of like, well, how do I do this? And for us, it's like, well, this is bread and butter. This is easy. It's table stakes.
That's a great strategy for some companies, right? If I don't have R&D dollars, I'm T-1 or T-2 in sort of when I bring on new capabilities. I think for everyone whose boardrooms are looking at them going, if we miss this, what will happen? You're going to have to go back and be like, here's what we're going to do. But experimentation means possible failures, but it also means like leapfrogging success. So yeah, pick one of the two sides.
Yeah.
And then
so with maybe some of that, so some of the organizations that are starting to look at this, whether they're the ones that, or maybe actually we split this up, is those ones that are into doing that experimentation and they want to kind of see where it fits now versus the ones that like to wait and see. What should those organizations be looking at? What should they start doing now with, you know, some of these technologies and services not necessarily being publicly available yet, but coming probably in the next 3-6 months or so, versus what should they prepare for or start to get ready for in like a year from now?
Yash, you have thoughts on this one before I take my broad brush view?
Not really. I mean, I think like integrating AI into any business process is going to be a pretty significant change. So like maybe, I don't know how, but like if you could just get people, sort of make them more agile before you make that big change.
Yeah, I mean, I think one is, we talked about data, so let's just leave that on the table. Get your data in order. Two is, where do you have process automation today that's deterministic that maybe can get enhanced? And I almost want to take that back. You got to be pretty advanced IPA to start pulling out a brain and putting in a different brain. So it's worth a combo. Where I think it's worth thinking through is your people are using it now. They're using it. I mean, I don't know if all of them are using it, probably not, but a good chunk are using it. And you've got to assume that's true. And so if you're going to block them from using it, it's not going to work. They're going to find ways. So enabling your organization to be access it and experiment it within the confines of, you know, safety and how you want their governance models to be, I think is probably where you start. And then we get into like, what are we using it from an enterprise perspective? But I think you got to enable the people in your organization that are ahead of the curve, that want to use it, that are using it, and then take that knowledge back and bring it in. I think organizations that have said, don't do anything. I mean, someone's picking up their phone and they've got ChatGPT on there and they're pressing copy and paste on their machine. Like, none of the roadblocks you put into place are going to be really sound from a population of intelligent developers. They're going to find ways around it. So make sure you're ahead of it and let them use it, and not put in roadblocks that are realistically very easy to traverse for them. And you get your plausible deniability. I think, you know, in the corporate structures, we get lost in that sometimes. You're probably going to lose the game if you don't enhance these people and get the learning back into your organization. And then, yeah, let's figure out the data stuff and where you want to focus it and ML ops and all that fun stuff. But enabling your people to use it, because my kids are using it, their teachers are using it. Like, this is a technology that everybody just decided to use and could use. I think is where we start.
Awesome. I like that. I like that answer. You? Maybe not looking at this from a like we're doing or a delivery service firm or kind of a technology side of things, but what about end users? So you being an end user, whether it be as an employee in a company or using it yourself in the day to day, how are you expecting to be impacted by AI? Right, whether it be you're using it as part of online shopping or using it in your day to day life. Do you see anywheres that one, where you're starting to see it come into play, or two, where you would like to see it come into play?
You start.
I start.
More than I do.
I mean, I've been using it in development a ton. Like, I probably don't even notice it anymore, but like, it's basically like while you're writing code, there's an autocomplete of like whatever you want to do. So it's like you just press tab and it's all written out. So that's great. I can also just point it to a file and be like, create documentation for me for this. That's also great. Like, just like small, like annoying things that are part of my job, I can now just offload a bunch of it um, to these generative AIs, and it's great.
So personally, I'm using it as a way for me to learn faster. Hey, digest this information and let me question you on it, right? It's like you have your own expert. Now, sometimes an expert that lies and, and an expert that's totally fake, but most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I don't think I've seen a hallucination yet on one of these questions I've asked, but, helping me to get to an answer faster is amazing. And, like I have this image in my head, and I'm an old man, but it's like, for those of you that are old, there's that Popeye in the can of spinach, and he packs and the spinach goes in and he gets muscles. And that's what it feels like to me. It feels like you could superpower yourself and just get to things faster. Like, there's stuff I don't like to do. I don't like writing bios about anybody, but especially myself. I'm just got ChatGPT to do that, and off we go. And there's all these things that used to take like minutes and hours, that I could be like 5 minutes ahead when it used to take me like 3 hours to be 5 minutes ahead. And I think self-empowerment is where we're going to start with this stuff. Like, I get enterprises want to like figure out risk profiles and look at mortgage renewals and all these cool use cases. But until their data's in order and they have some sort of competitive data to put into these things to become unique, I just feel like you can empower everyone in your organization that wants it to do way more, to do cooler things, way faster. And if you don't, they will, and you'll be playing catch up. And I don't think we want to do that anymore, because I still think Excel rules the world, and that's because we took too long to give them the tools to just solve technical problems. Like, it's the most used coding language of all time, I think, if we were to guess. So let's not do that with AI. I think we'll slow ourselves down. So if I'm doing something, that's sort of what I would tell organizations to do and focus on.
I think you answered it pretty good there. Yeah. Like, from what you're saying, for instance, it's just those small little pieces that you have to deal with throughout the day, whether it be a daily thing or just they pop up now and then. Bios. I've been using the same thing myself for some of those. Any of the speaking engagements I've been doing, I just throw it at something like a ChatGPT, and here's all my information. Give me a decent bio, 1 or 2 paragraphs long, and then I can just from there take it and just adjust slightly to make it actually work properly. But in other forms of work that I do on a daily basis, doing a lot of content generation, it's very, very helpful for that type of stuff.
Well, it's interesting because you can now take a piece of information that comes out of ChatGPT, put it into an engine that builds a presentation deck for you, and then go to a tool that'll actually build graphics for you live. And like, I need a unicorn dancing on the moon with maracas, and I have it. I would have had to go to Angie and the marketing team, and they would have been rolling their eyes and saying, "I'm not making you a Greenlight unicorn," but now I can. So just and I'm behind. Right. And I keep hearing new ways to do things and trying them. And so we're all experimenting with the stuff we're going to do. It's kind of cool. Yeah. And scary and cool.
Yeah, I really like the idea of like, it's minutes, but they just stack on top of each other so many times that it becomes significant at the end. Like, you're not making these giant drastic changes that completely overhaul how your workflow goes. But like, yeah, it's these small, tiny things that just add up.
And they'll add up. We'll lose those skill sets. I don't have any map of the city in my brain anymore. Right? I have no special routes. Just Waze tells me what to do, and I'm a slave to Waze, and I'm happy. And I'm doing other things. Not in the car. Clearly, I'm focusing in the car, guys. Don't get weird. But I think that'll happen with this too. I think we're just going to offload parts of our brain, as we always do, whether it's memorizing numbers or maps, and either we're going to use that to have spare time, or we're going to use it to do more. And if that's how this works out, it's great. Yeah. Otherwise, I would like to bow down to our new AI overlords and tell them I'm on their side.
Well, that kind of brings us to the end of our discussion for this topic today. It has been quite insightful hearing from both of you in terms of some of the areas that we see coming down the line, some of the things that we're starting to look at ourselves. So it'll be a fairly exciting, I think, into the new year is when we're really going to start to see some of these come to fruition and really start to drive out there. I hope everyone that's listening to this got something out of it, that they enjoyed this. I want to thank both of you for coming on this sort of maiden voyage of our podcast with me, discussing this topic. To any of our listeners, if your organization is looking for a delivery partner in this space, please feel free to check us out, greenlightconsulting.com, or send us an email at rpa.info@greenlightconsulting.com. We'd be happy to talk to you about how we can support you on your automation journey and your AI journey. And on that, I want to just thank you all for listening and have yourself a wonderful day.